Somebody needs to help me understand what is going on and how Capcom allowed this to happen. 2002. I own a GameCube. Resident Evil is an amazing franchise. Capcom decides that they're going to remake Resident Evil exclusively for the GameCube, and which turns out to be, to me, the best Resident Evil game ever created, and the Resident Evil that is most true to the survival horror roots of the series ever created. How many years later, 13 years later, Capcom decides that they're going to make a Resident Evil remake of a remake, an HD remake of the remake. And keep in mind, Capcom has a pretty decent track record of porting games to the PC. Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, Street Fighter 4, Devil May Cry 4, Street Fighter Cross Tekken. In fact, the only real games I can think of that they did a bad job with were the original port of Resident Evil 4, which was rectified with the Resident Evil 4 HD Steam Edition, and Dead Frame Rate 3. Oh man, Dead Frame Rate 3, from what I've heard and what I've seen, is downright awful. But now we have a 13-year-old game in the 2002 Resident Evil remake, and Capcom, on a PlayStation 4, a next-generation console, can't get the game to run at 1080p at 60 frames per second. To make matters worse, they can't even get the game to run at 1080p 30 frames per second. A 13-year-old game cannot run at a locked 30 frames per second, let alone 60. And to me, that is embarrassing, that is inexcusable, that is lazy. I don't know who they have working for them anymore. Maybe they have middle school children working for them. I mean, I hear they're having money issues, they're broke, they're really having a ton of financial problems, but this is something that should not happen. There is no reason, there is no excuse that a 13-year-old game should not be running at 1080p at 60 frames per second. Period. Yet, if you go to the video over on Digital Foundry and you go to the comment section, you will see a whole bunch of Capcom corporate slaves damage controlling this very issue. Talking about how, one, the game doesn't need to run at 60 frames per second. Two, they want to damage control and say the game was developed natively for 30 frames per second. Yet, I can run the game on my PC through my Dolphin emulator at 60 frames per second. And you cannot tell me that a bunch of hacks, a bunch of regular people or regular programmers that have no connection or communication to the video game industry, Capcom, or the Resident Evil development team can get an emulator to run the game at 60 frames per second, but the actual people that work at Capcom cannot. You have people talking about how gamers are spoiled, how we're ungrateful, how we always complain about things, and to me, I really don't think that it's too much to ask for that a 13-year-old game runs at 60 frames per second, or hell, even 30 locked. There is no reason why a 13-year-old game should be dropping down to 16 frames per second. I am hoping that this is really just, an early build, an alpha build, an unfinished build, or maybe a buggy debug version of the game, something, anything. But I cannot fathom how this happened, why this happened, and why we have Capcom corporate slaves literally defending this. How is this any different than what Ubisoft did with Assassin's Creed, where the game was marred with technical issues and slowed down and plagued with poor frame rate issues? Why is Ubisoft crucified, but Capcom is getting a free pass on this, on a 13-year-old game? Gamers and you fanboys and you corporate slaves, you need to get together and you need to get it through your heads. You need to get it through your thick skulls. If you are not going to stand up and complain and consider games of this nature to pretty much be unsavory and not wanted, if you don't take issue with products like this and developers going to keep pulling a Halo Master Chief Collection. They're going to keep pulling an Assassin's Creed Unity. They're going to keep pulling this bull crap and keep giving us less and less and less. There's no reason why a 13-year-old game that costs $20 runs in this dismal shape and form. Period. And if you keep standing up for it and you keep accepting it, then guess what, people? It's only going to get worse and worse as time goes forward.